All right, selection and drawing. Now that you know how to navigate your three-dimensional space here in SketchUp, we're going to start creating things. In order to create things, you're going to have to know how to use your selection tool as well as your drawing tools right here. So we're going to cover those in this exercise. Now in this exercise, you're not going to show me an example of selecting and using the eraser because if you erase something, it's not going to be there on the page, and I don't believe that the selections show up whenever you print something, so I'm not so worried about that. But you are going to show me some examples of using the line tool, arc, and some shapes. So first things first, as far as your tools go, you have your select tool, which is your arrow. You have your eraser. You have your line tool, and then within your line tool, you have straight line. You also have a freehand line. You have your arc, which also contains a two-pointed arc, a three-pointed arc, and a pie. You can feel free to play with these later, but we're only going to cover the two-pointed arc for the time being. And then you have some shapes. You have a rectangle, a rotated rectangle, a circle, a polygon. Again, we're going to cover the shapes. We're not going to worry about this rotated rectangle for right now. You can try it out on your own, but we're not going to worry about it. So, first thing with the selection tool, you can see here, as I click on things, you get this dotted surface. That's to tell you that you have certain things selected. Now, not only do you have the surfaces of the objects that you create, but you also have the lines that contain those surfaces as well that you can also select and do things to. Just like with Illustrator and Photoshop, if you hold down Shift, you can select multiple lines, multiple surfaces, multiple objects. You can also click and hold to drag out a line. As you can see, if you do not get an entire object or an entire surface, an entire face within that dragged out box, it does not select. So here on the edge of this mouse, the bottom, this line isn't blue, it's black, whereas this line is blue. So the box that I dragged out selected these couple of pieces here, but it didn't select the bottom line here, therefore it did not select any of this surface. So if you want to get an entire object with the selection tool, make sure that your box goes around the entire object. And there you go. You can see underneath, around, everywhere, you have all blue lines, all dotted surfaces. That is fully selected. Now, if you group objects, you can right click or control click. You can make a group. Whenever it's a group, now if you click off of it or click back onto it, it will select the whole object. But just keep that in mind. If you're trying to move an object, you can't just click on one surface and hope that it goes anywhere. You've got to select the whole thing. The eraser here, if you click on a surface, you click on something, it erases. It's pretty straightforward. I, however, am not a fan of using the eraser tool. What I would prefer that you do is, if you create something, even if you have, a couple of boxes or simple shapes here, if you create something, rather than using the eraser, I feel like the eraser is too erratic and it's not defined. I would rather that you learn how to select them and then hit delete on your keyboard. Alright, so you can see I'm selecting the surfaces and then hitting delete. I can then go back in, select the lines and hit delete. I can also, as I was showing you with the selection tool before, drag a box around everything and hit delete. Alright, so again, I don't expect you to show me these things because you're not going to show me anything if you're deleting it. Keep them in mind. Be cautious of the eraser. So let's create something here. We can use our line tool. The basic line tool activated by L, you can see here, is a connect the dot tool. It's more or less the same thing as the pen tool like in Illustrator. As long as you keep clicking, it's going to keep connecting lines. All right. If you are looking down at the surface, it will do flat things. If you are looking up into the air, it will create weird shapes that might freak you out a little bit. So just be aware of that. Line tool is also something to be cautious with whenever you are using it, especially if you're going to use it in midair, not attached to something as a freestanding object. You never really know if you're clicking up in the air if you're going to get a flat surface or where it's even going to exist. See, I assumed that it was going to be out in that field out here, and then I rotate around it, and it's floating up above this mouse. So you got to be really careful with the line tool. I usually suggest if you want to draw something, if you want to put something down on the ground, to go get your rectangle tool first. That's a good segue into the rectangle. You can draw out a flat rectangle on the ground. You can draw whatever it is that you need, and then you can delete everything around that you don't need. All right, and then you would have your shape. Just something to consider. If you get good response with the line tool, if you like using it, if you're good at it, and you can keep track of things not floating in space, more power to you. But if you're having a hard time with it, be aware of that as an option. Okay, get that last piece. All right, with the line tool, some things to be aware of that will help keep you grounded, that will keep you from doing crazy things, is your inferences that we talked about in your notes. So you can see in the middle, there is an axis. You have your green line, your red line, and your blue line. Those correspond to your X, Y, and Z axes. Whenever you're drawing, whenever you're using the line tool, it will try to guess for you and try to make you do inferences in those directions as well. So if I click once and I move my mouse to the right, you can see it's giving me a red line. That's telling me that this line is going to be completely flat on the surface and that it is only moving to the right, totally parallel to this red line down here. If I continue on from there, say I wanted to draw a square on the bottom, I should look for my green line. The green line is going to be parallel also to the ground, and it's going to head towards the back direction. So even though these green lines, this green line that I'm currently making here, and this line, they look like they're going to intersect eventually, they are actually parallel, and they are flat on the ground. If I continue on, you can see I have a red line again. That's making me go left and right. And if I keep moving it, you can see that it's actually trying to infer that I am trying to make a square here. It's trying to help me out. It's saying like, hey, if you want to make this a square, you can stop right there. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to it, click on it. And then the final line, you can see it is also green again. I'll click here. And if you orbit around it, you can see it is very long, but it is a nice perfectly rectangle shape. It's got nice 90-degree corners here. You can see that it is parallel to these lines and to these lines. If you want to go upward with this line, you have blue inferences. So I can do the same thing. I can go up with a blue inference. I can go over. Same thing. It's saying, hey, do you want to make a square going straight up in the air? Yes, I do. I go down to that corner, and now I have a surface floating in the air. With the line tool, it's also important to know that you can connect anchor points from really anywhere to make surfaces. So that just gave me a triangle, and if I do this other side, it should give me kind of just a wedge shape. If you connect lines, it will automatically fill in surfaces like that. If you don't want them in there, feel free to click on it with the selection tool and you can delete. So maybe you wanted like a trough shape like that and you wanted to take that side off, you can. Maybe you just want the lines. Maybe you want it to look like ropes or supports or something holding this sign up. You can totally do that. All right. Same thing here though. If I want to fill in this surface now again, I want to keep those lines. You can also use the line tool. If you just make a line across two other lines, it will fill in a surface. And then if you want to delete that line, there you go. And now you have the surface back. All right. So there's a lot of dynamic things here you can do with the line tool. All right. If you'd like to pause the video here, take a second, go play with the line tool, you can. Before you do that, keep in mind that I want to see some examples of lines, but I also want to see some examples of lines that are not rectangles. So don't just draw me a bunch of flat rectangles on the ground, or I'm going to just assume that you're using the rectangle tool. You want to show me some things that maybe you drew up into the air, maybe something like that. Maybe show me some dynamic surfaces where you connected dots, things like that. That would be much more interesting. As far as the other line tool, this is your freehand tool. This is good for just kind of scribbling and drawing. If you need an organic shape, you can kind of do this, but as you can see, as much scribbling and squiggling as I do, it's going to kind of break it down into geometry anyways and give yourself straight, not so much curved lines. So you can use this, just be aware that that's going to happen. All right. Very straightforward. The freehand line tool works in pretty much most of the same ways. If you're drawing off into whoa, I don't know what happened there. If you're drawing off into the distance, you never know where your surface is actually going to be. All right, keep that in mind. Whoa. All right, I'm gonna get rid of these things. All right, so let's talk about the arc. The arc works a lot like the line tool, in the fact that it only creates a line. It doesn't actually create a shape that has anything filled in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the bottom of what's going to be a rectangle here, but I'm going to round off the top with an arc. So I'm going to hit escape to let go of my line tool, and I'm going to go grab just the regular arc. I'm going to pick up where I left off with the line tool. And if you move your mouse around, you can see all kinds of different wacky things happening. But what it wants to know first is where you want your arc to start and where you want it to end. You can tell it later which direction you want the arc to go. If you want it to go up into space, if you want it to stay flat, you just need to tell it where the arc point is going to start and stop. You can also tell it the depth. So right now, if I do that, it's going to give me a straight line, which is totally defeats the purpose of using curve. But if I start to move my line back, you see how that middle line is green? That's telling me that I'm staying on the ground green axis, and it's going to let me move that arc out relatively forever. If I zoom out here, if I move up, it's going to let me just keep ballooning that up. So if you find that useful, you can use that. If you want something a little bit more subtle, a little bit easier, you can do that. It will, however, if I move subtly in the right direction upward, you can see that it's also going up into space. This is going to take a little bit of practice. Sometimes it just depends on how you move your mouse. Sometimes it depends on where you're located on your screen. You might be able to, if you want to go up, having the sky available in your view is going to be the most helpful thing for you to go up into the air, like that. So you could do a curve up into the air. I could also come down here. I could keep a curve on the ground. If I draw a line across the bottom here, it should fill in my surface up top. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the arc tool. Now you can, anywhere that you find points or surfaces or lines, you can attempt to connect the arc. You just got to be careful, especially if you are no longer working on inferences. You can't really trust that those things are necessarily going to be straight up and down or where you want them. See, I was kind of assuming that this would curve, if I was looking on it, that it would be a straight line here and that it would be curved this way, but it actually curved to the side. So again, don't trust it. Okay, that might work. There we go. That's what I was looking for the first time. All right, you might be able to get the results that you want, but just make sure that you double check it if you don't have inferences. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to lastly the shape tools. Now you already saw me do one rectangle. Pretty straightforward. One click, second click. There we go. Nice rectangle. Inside of the other shape tool, another nice rectangle. Great. You also have circles. The way the circle works is from the center point. So you do one click, that's your center. You move away, the circle gets bigger, gets smaller. There we go. There's a circle. You can go back and find the center point again. You can make circles inside of circles. You can put circles off the side. You can make a circle and then have it touch that circle's edge. Now, as you can see, if I do things over one another, these are actually all intersected now. Just their lines are touching. So if I delete these lines, it is all now one surface. Keep that in mind. Okay. We can also use, what else is in here? Oop, wrong one. Polygon. Okay. Hexagon right there. Depending on where you rotate around, the points of the polygon go out. But you can see same thing. You got some pre-made shapes. They have outlines. They have interior lines, so on and so forth. So, show me one example of you using the line tool. Show me one example of you using the freehand line tool. Show me one example of you using the rectangle, the circle, and the polygon, and give me one example of you using the arc. You can arrange them something like this. That's fine. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be a work of art. Just make sure that I can see everything that we covered in this video. And try to make it obvious. If I have to work too hard to figure out what it is exactly that you did, obviously we're going to have problems and you're not going to get the points if I can't tell what you did. So if you can lay things out, show me an example of each one of the things here, and then file, print, you should be in good shape. Now obviously this printer isn't a school printer because I'm doing this at home, but you should be able to print on our printer and you should be able to turn it in with the rubric after you've done all the other exercises. Okay? If you need any help, let me know. Otherwise, get to it and good luck.